What's up guys, Sci-Fi Guy 2094 here. Today in this video, I'm going to be doing a quick recap of Vikings Season 4, the first 10 episodes. Now this season is longer than the other ones. It's 20 episodes total. So I watched the first 10 and I'm going to do a recap of that. And then in the next video, I'm going to do a recap of the final 10 episodes of Season 4. So just going to focus on the first 10 episodes for now. Now, if you remember at the end of Season 3, after their failed attempt to capture the city of Paris, they're in the boat and Ragnar's like, Floki, come here. And he's like, you killed Athelstan. And Floki is just speechless because he figured out, you killed my best friend. So basically what happens when they get back to Kattegat is Ragnar is still pretty ill, right? So Ragnar is ill and he's still kind of recovering from, whatever type of ailment that he had at the end of Season 3 during the siege on Paris. And while he's basically healing up and resting and getting better, Bjorn takes it upon himself to have Floki arrested. And I'm just like, oh man, like, this is crazy. Because it wasn't like the direct word of Ragnar. So I'm like, what is Ragnar going to say? And so basically, once Ragnar is like actually able to like speak and get up and things like that, he's like, well, don't you think if I wanted Floki arrested, I would have done it? And so he's kind of making the impression that he didn't really want Floki to be arrested. But once he's well enough, he has Floki, I believe it was Bjorn who actually had him like kind of tied up to this post, right? But once Ragnar is able to get out of bed and things, he kind of just goes and looks at Floki. He's chained up. It's freezing outside. The guy's probably starving. And Helga is kind of trying to keep the kids away from like throwing things at him. And, she'll bring him like food and water and whatnot. But I'm expecting Ragnar to like set him free, but instead he doesn't do anything. He just watches and looks on as he's just basically chained to a pole in the freezing cold, and he's just basically being starved and froze to death basically. And what happens is Helga frees him, right? And Ragnar brings Helga some food for the winter for her and her child, and he's like, did you free Floki? And she's like, I don't know. And then he's like, well, if you did, I don't blame you. So Floki's fled, right? He's kind of fled into the mountains. There's this river, and of course Ragnar sends his young sons and a scouting team to basically go find Floki, right? So Floki is somewhat clever, but unfortunately he's not clever enough. So he's hiding in the river, right? But one of Ragnar's sons is like, I don't know how he knows, but he's under the water, but he can still spot him. I don't know how he did it, but he sees Floki and he's like, hey guys, they're over here. So then the men come and they get Floki. So he's captured. They bring him back to Kattegat. Well, the city basically, because he was kind of he was still in Kattegat. I'd say he's still in Kattegat, but he was like, he had gone into the mountains, right? And this large river. So they bring him back. Once he's back, Ragnar has him chained up basically. So he's got both arms out. So his arms are out on both sides, and he's in like this cave, right? And so there's just like water dripping everywhere, all over his head. He's wet, he's cold, he's basically naked except like something around his junk, so he's not completely, nude. And Helga comes, and she's basically like, she's exhausted because this whole time while he's been just hung up like this, she's got this bowl of water, and she's just been, and obviously this guy's way taller than she is, and of course he's suspended kind of up on this rock, and so she's like straining herself to hold this bowl of like this wooden bowl like right on his head like this, so at least he's not getting too soaked. And then she dumps it out, and she kind of does that, and this probably goes on for a few days, right? And Ragnar comes back, and previously I've spoken with Helga, which is Floki's wife, and he's like, he says to Floki, "You haven't told her yet, have you?" And then he just walks away, and Floki's like, "Told me what?" And then she reveals that unfortunately their daughter died from a fever. And then Floki's just like, he just breaks down crying, and it's because he was, it's a really sad scene, because previously we had seen how he didn't think he'd be a good father, and he would always push Helga away, and he'd just tell her to go, and he was afraid like he'd be a terrible father, and that his daughter would end up like him, which he has faults, and which personally I never understood, because to me Floki is the most loyal character to King Ragnar. He always has been, but for some reason he thinks there's terrible things about him and that he wouldn't be a great father. So sometimes he'd send his wife and daughter away, and he wouldn't really want to be around them. But anyway, he just breaks down during this scene, and it's super sad because he was a good father, I think, to his child, and a good husband to Helga. And like I said, he's the most loyal character to Ragnar throughout this entire the entire first, second, and third season. So he finds out that his daughter's passed, and he's very sad about that. Obviously he's mourning her death. And then the next day Ragnar comes, and he's got this knife, and I think it's finally time that he's gonna put an end to Floki's suffering. And this whole time I'm praying, like, please do not take Floki's life, because he has been the most loyal person to you through thick and thin. And instead he just cuts him down, and he's like, "You've suffered enough." So I was so happy about that. Floki did not get killed by Ragnar. Okay, now that's the main part, the first few episodes. Now the later half, talk about like these next 5 episodes, we have kind of like the main plot of, I would say, probably season 4 once I watch the remaining 10 episodes. But what happens is there's another Viking king, another Norseman, who comes to Kattegat, and he brings ships and men, and he's heard of Ragnar's exploits and how he has gone to Paris, even though they failed at the siege on Paris. He went there and he fought, and he's heard of his other raids on other places, right? Like in England, Wessex. And basically he's like, "I want to join you on your raid," right? So basically it's the winter, but when the spring comes, they're able to actually go out and raid again. So they head to France, basically, or Francia is what they call it here. And if you remember, Rollo and his men were left behind. Some of their camp was left behind in Francia as like kind of a almost like an insurance policy, because like if the Norsemen come back, it's like, well, you have your own men that are still here. But what really pissed me off is Rollo actually betrayed the other Norsemen, and he had them killed by the French emperor. Basically had them killed. And now he's the Duke, and he's trying to protect Paris and everything, but it's like, you wouldn't have even been in Paris if it weren't for the Norsemen and your Viking brothers and sisters that help you get there. So when you have them all killed, that really pissed me off. It's like, okay, man, Rollo is just he's like completely lost his way, and he's turned on his own people. Now he says he's a Christian now, but I don't truly believe he's a Christian. He's playing the role, yeah, that he is, this Christian, and he wants to protect France from these pagans. But I think deep down he's still a Norseman. He still believes in the Norse gods, I believe. But anyway, what happens is Ragnar and his army, they're coming into France, right? They're coming upriver, and Rollo has put together this plan to basically, once their ships arrive at these two towers, they'll pull this rope, this chain, right? It'll knock the boats over, which that works. And then they start shooting these arrows, like these flaming arrows. They use these catapults. There's oil on their ships, and basically they start burning their boats, right? Now there was like a two-pronged attack. So there was an attack by sea, which was kind of foiled, but Lagatha took a band of troops around on land, and they were going to attack the towers. Rollo catches onto that, and basically he corners them as well, and they have to retreat. So in the final battle between the Francia, which is like France, Paris, whatever you want to call it, and the Norsemen, there is an all-out battle between them, right? And it comes to the point where Ragnar has to face Rollo, and they're just going at it, like, first with swords and axes, and then eventually hand to hand. And then, right when we think there's going to be a deciding moment in this battle, one of the Norsemen grabs Ragnar, and they basically retreat. And, unfortunately, for the Norsemen, that is, they are defeated. But again, luckily the French people are all good. They are happy. Like, they repelled the pagan invasion, and they're safe now. So at the end, we see kind of like a little time skip, and his sons are all grown up, right? He's got like these three sons. The one, Ivar, the one who the seer said would never walk, and then the other two sons, and of course Bjorn is still there, his son from his first wife, Lagatha, obviously. And this village has grown. There's more people, and they're just talking about, well, Ragnar's gone, and yeah, he left us. The sons are talking about his legacy, what he did, what he didn't do, him basically leaving Kattegat with no king and just up and disappearing, basically. So at the end of episode 10, Ragnar comes back to Kattegat. Nobody knows where he's been. It's been like, I want to say, it's been a while. I almost want to say 12 years, but I don't know if it was quite 12 years. Maybe it was, maybe one of the kids said he was here when I was last 12 or something. But it's been like 5, 6, 7. It's been a few years, right? Like, he's been gone a while. So he returns, and then he's just like, well, it's me. I'm here. If you want to be king, you have to kill me. And then nobody really takes up the sword because, I don't know, they still revere and respect him, even though he kind of left them. And Ragnar's just saying, like, what kind of king leaves his people? He's basically trying to entice somebody to kill him and become king. So, yeah, I don't know if he's actually wanting to die or if he feels guilty, because his three sons were talking about it earlier. His four sons with Bjorn, they were talking about it. Basically how when the guy at the end of season, I guess it was the end of season 3, right? When he came to Kattegat and he told Floki and Ragnar that, the people of Wessex had massacred everybody in their settlement. Ragnar, he took that news, and he's just basically the guy that told him that. He killed that guy, and then he didn't tell his people because he was more worried about the raid on Paris and all the riches that they would acquire from going to the land of the Franks, right? So he didn't tell anybody. So basically now everyone knows, and they're like, okay, he betrayed us because he didn't tell us that our people were killed on the settlement, which was the agreement that King Egbert had made with King Ragnar, that they could have land and they could farm, and there would be peace between the two people. Yeah, that didn't happen. So anyway, everybody here is like, they kind of hate Ragnar's guts, but like nobody's going to take up the sword to kill him. So anyway, that's the end of season, or rather episode 10, season 4. This is going to be split into 2 separate videos because it's a longer one. I'm going to watch the second half, which is 10 more episodes, and then do a review on that. But anyway, as far as these first 10 episodes go in season 4, I gotta say this was a really good season. Very interesting. Some really good action scenes. And then you also have the subplot with King Egbert, and basically how he basically usurped the throne of Mercia from the princess because the ruling council made an agreement that they would sign the land over to King Egbert, so he now has control of both Mercia and Wessex. And then the princess, like, she feels betrayed because that wasn't originally what they had discussed. It was her idea, or she was under the impression that basically the Civil War, he would like put that to an end, and once it was stable again, she would be put back on the throne. So he basically deceived her. And he also deceived the one fat guy who was his ally, who had like the iron hand or whatever. He also deceived him because they were supposed to split Mercia between the two of them. But instead, once the princess is out of the picture, King Egbert just has the entire kingdom of Mercia for himself. So this guy, politically, very smart guy. So you have that whole plot going on, and then unfortunately the princess gets by King Egbert's mistress, which freaky stuff, but his mistress is his son's wife. And then they send Prince Alfred on this pilgrimage to the holy city, and they think he's going to be some type of great holy leader for the Christian kingdom. So you also had that whole plot going on. But man, I gotta say, this season's turned out to be really good. It's definitely a lot going on with the princess, the king of Mercia, who's basically the king of Wessex as well. The king of Wessex really took control of Mercia. Of course, Rollo being in Paris defending their city, and then the Vikings or the Norsemen coming back to attack Paris, and Rollo and Ragnar have to face off head to head. Whoa, there's just so much going on. You gotta follow this pretty closely. It's not like too complex, but you definitely want to pay attention. But anyway, that is my review of, or my recap of the first 10 episodes of season 4. It's really good, and I think the second half is going to be even better. So I'm really enjoying this show.